Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy and Wise podcast with global sales trainer and professional speaker, Lois Kofi. Each week, it is her goal to share inspiration and education for you to be, do, have the best health and wealth and wisdom for your life.
All right, everyone. Well, hello and welcome back for another episode of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise. And today is September 30th, the time of this recording, and I'm so grateful to have my friend Rosie here today. We're going to be talking about grief and how it's a heart issue, not a head issue, and it really summarizes the whole month of September has been about suicide awareness and mental health awareness. And we're super excited to have you guys here today, and we're going to be going about the next 30 minutes just talking with Rosie about how she helps people. And really, I'm going to first of all share my testimonial, and then I'll introduce Rosie, and we'll open it up for questions later too. If you have any questions, you can just comment below. Definitely looking forward to hearing what you can learn from Rosie today. So earlier this year, we all had this pandemic, right? A lot of people have experienced loss and grieving. And so whether you lost a job, whether you maybe lost a family member, I had two family members pass away, not COVID related, but still unexpected sudden change is also something that can be hard and can cause grief and challenges. And so today I wanted to bring Rosie on because she does work as an advanced grief therapist. She's helped me better understand how to work through and recover from grief. Before meeting Rosie, I didn't think recovery from grief was a thing. I thought it was just something that you stacked on layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and you just sucked it up, buttercup, right? You just keep taking those hits and you keep going, because that's what a lot of us had modeled to us growing up. And I will say, for my own testimonial, because I met Rosie and I worked with her for a whole summer, it's made me a better business owner. It has, I believe, indirectly increased my income because I released a lot of pain, I released a lot of grief, and it's making me more authentic. And I'm not done yet. I'm still on my journey. So Rosie, thank you so much for persevering today, for not allowing technology to stop us. And I'm super excited for you to share your story and how did you become an advanced grief therapist? That's just, did you say that you wanted to be that when you grew up, when you were a kid?
Well, no, not actually. I ran a lot from grief. My family didn't know how to deal with grief to begin with. That's probably one of the things. I think for some people, we get into our passions. We don't even know it's our passions indirectly. We end up doing other things, and it kind of through our own experience, our own personal experience, we end up in things that we had no idea we were going to end up wanting to do, liking to do, and having a passion for it. And so I am a grief specialist. I work with clients. How I started this whole process, and that's the question you asked to begin with, was I was working in addiction. I was working as an addiction counselor, and I thought that that's what I was going to do the rest of my life, doing that. I loved it. I fell in even to that. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I kind of went into school as a little smart aleck, just trying to, do the easier, softer way, just get some credits, meet a guy, all the wrong reasons, right, to go to school, right? It was just to take care of me in life, and the career was not it. My friend wanted to meet the guy. She got the guy. I got the career. So we ended up going in, and I ended up finding this certification program, and I found working in a hospital, which I hated hospitals, and here I am in this hospital on a unit with people that were recovering from addiction. And I loved it. I fell in love with that process, and I fell in love with that career. So spin forward 20 years later, and even during that time when we would do groups and educations, we were really on relapse prevention mode during that time. And the big thing was anger. So I went in and I did groups on anger and self-esteem. But when I was in that process of doing it, I realized there was a lot of pain and loss with people in treatment. And I recognized that from the beginning on, and I would say something to my supervisors. We are really needing to work on loss. It's not about anger. There's about a lot of loss. And they said, oh yeah, we know that inner child work, all that, but really we need to do anger management. That's why they're relapsing, because of their anger. And I really saw it underneath. It was about loss. So spin forward 20 years later, I move out to Temecula, and I find a treatment center, and I started to they wanted me to do a lecture on self-esteem and grief. And my story is a lot about self-esteem to begin with, and developing and identifying and coming out of such a low self-esteem that felt real comfortable with that, but I didn't feel comfortable with grief. See, my dad had died 14 years before that, and I'd stuffed all that. I thought I dealt with grief. I went to the traditional therapy with grief, but I hadn't really dealt with the whole grief. So I avoided topics like that. So I was like, everybody else do it but me. Oh, no, we want you to present this one. So next thing I know, the owner of the treatment center heard me and said, you're perfect for this, as I'm sobbing through the whole thing. And I felt like just humility, like I can't be up here sobbing, but everybody was sobbing with me, the audience, everything. And he said, no, that's really authentic. And I didn't want to be that authentic, that raw. And he said, that's what we need. And so he ended up a year later starting a day program in this treatment center. And he said, I want you to develop a grief and loss, like an hour, 2-hour program on a Wednesday. And I said, okay. And I thought, well, I'll just keep it all head. And that's why we talked, it's a heart issue. I thought we could just keep it all heady, and I would be there to process their feelings, but I could stay in my head through this process. And I developed this education, and it was going real well. Next thing you know, I'm thinking, no, we need 3 hours to do this. It's just not enough time. So he gave me the 3-hour period to work with these clients. And also I wanted to tell you, backtrack. I moved my mom with us, and we moved out here to Temecula to have a better community for my kids, and to have a place where my mom could live with us. We could own a bigger house to support all that out here versus Orange County. And so my mom was starting to get, as elderly and as sick and as, feeble as she was getting. I was watching her progressively going downhill. And so here I am doing this grief and loss, and she gets sick. We almost lose her once already. And I'm trying to just keep afloat, keep that professionalism, do the grief and loss, but go home. And I had all the stuff at home that I was dealing with, but I was doing that Academy Award recovery that we talk about in my grief program. I was acting like everything's okay, and I'm a professional, and I can separate my home and my work, right? As people pour in their hearts to me, I'm stuffing mine. And so then my mom dies. She gets diagnosed with cancer at just a emergency room trip. From that day, 13 days later, she dies.
Wow.
Had no idea she had cancer. They said it was colon or ovarian. So 9 months later, I'm still running with my little high heels, going to work and doing the educations and thinking I'm well, because I took 2 weeks off instead of 1 week off from my dad. I took 2 weeks off work. I think I should be okay. I go back to work for 9 months, acting okay, recovered, everything else. And everybody was saying to me, yes, you know how to do this. We know, we're not worried about you. You're strong, you got it. And so I would play the part and go home and drive home feeling like I'm falling apart. I had no idea that when you're in grief like that, it affects your self-esteem. It affects your livelihood. It affects your business. It affects everything. If you are not mentally well, you can affect your whole body and your whole life. And your emotions are connected to that, all that. And so here I was running around doing this. And I ended up 9 months later. And that's what I always say. A lot of times I will see people 9 months after the death or the loss, not right away, because don't you realize you're really busy during those 9 months, taking care of funeral arrangements, wrapping your head around, if it's a divorce, just taking care of the divorce, wrapping your head around it. And your feelings don't catch up to you until you stop being busy. And see, that was my go-to. I was a workaholic and I was busy. And I didn't realize that, because I got a lot from working in my field, and I could just pour into everybody else. but I wasn't taking care of myself. And so in the end, 9 months later, I crashed and burned. I went on a vacation and I was, my husband talked me into it. I wasn't too thrilled about that. Should have been my first sign. Like, why wouldn't I want to go on a cruise with my family and enjoy myself? And after we came out of that cruise, like 5 days later, I crashed and burned. I got into paranoia, panic attacks, anxiety, and I wouldn't leave my house. And I took off 5 months from work because I felt this incredible shame. And I had all these feelings. I didn't know it was grief. I didn't know my anger. For 9 months, I did come home and I'd scream and yell at everybody else at home. And at work, I was like, happy, sunshine, lovely, wonderful Rosie. And nobody knew. Nobody knew I was living two lives. I didn't even know I was living two lives. So the reason I got into this is that when I finally had to admit that I was having this grief, as a professional, I realized I refer to a lot of professionals and professionals refer to me, but I did not feel safe to talk to a professional. I had belief systems that I was not supposed to feel this way. I was supposed to be able to handle it, maybe feel it, but not be able to be over it. All those mistaken beliefs that I should present like I'm well, that I should be well. And then people would say to me, oh yeah, you're strong, you know how to do this. And when I did say the little few times, like, I'm really struggling, they would say, oh, I'm worried about you. So what did I compute that? There's something wrong with me.
Right.
When grief is supposed to be natural, normal, unfortunately, people don't take it as a natural, normal thing. They end up what I call stuffing it, and it becomes cumulative. I hadn't realized that I had never grieved my dad fully. I had never gave myself permission to grieve my childhood. I had relationships that had been gone, relationships that died, relationships that left, moves, all that was just move forward. See, society tells us how to obtain things. They don't teach us how to lose things. They tell you, just, deal with it, get over it, grieve it. But nobody tells you how to do it, And we're supposed to learn it from our families, right? And friends and society. But if society is the same thing running, what are we learning from? If society isn't learning how to be compassionate and allow us to process. I mean, I hear people come to me and they say, people think I should be over it. It's been 2 months. Like, what? Your husband committed suicide and you should be over it. It's, 2 months. No, but there's no time frame for loss. And then there's also people say, well, what stage am I on? Well, I don't believe in the stages anymore either. The stage is cookie cutter. We're not cookie cutters. We're human beings. And so I needed to find somebody that could support me. And more than anything, I needed somebody to listen to me. People say, well, I'll listen to you, but then they give me feedback. Or then they tell me I shouldn't feel a certain way. Or then they tell me to get a hobby. Or then they tell me that, things are going to get better. Or, your mom was 80 years old, she's in a better place. Well, I know that in here, but my heart is grieving. I'm not in a better place because I want her here. I need to be grieving. Plus all the things that happen when you lose somebody. Sometimes you wonder, as a caregiver, did I give her enough care? Why didn't I see the signs of the cancer? And then I get whirling about that. And so I needed to be able to have those feelings, to listen to it, validate, have somebody hold space for it, and then help me walk through the story in my head. Because see, it's the story we build about that relationship that may keep us stuck and grieving it. Because if you've got feelings of guilt, unresolved anger, unresolved loss, betrayal, it's very hard to grieve the whole person. You don't even want to think about the good stuff. The good stuff brings up too much pain, so you push that aside. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just nodding my head because I was that stuffer, and I always, we catch ourselves. We say, well, I'm just too busy, self-care, taking care of grief. I never ever realized it was a thing. So everything you're saying, I can totally relate to, and I'm sure our viewers can too. And what you said about we're never taught how to lose things, I wrote that down because that's mind blowing. And in this year of COVID-19 pandemic 2020, there's been a lot of loss. So I'm glad you brought up, divorce is a loss, job loss is a loss. If you lose a friendship for whatever reason, not death related, but friendships end, and they don't always end on a positive note, right? So you have so many things of loss. Moving, you taught me that, because I've moved across country multiple times. So we just moved. I have kids who are going through their own loss and grieving, and I can't believe that this was never really taught to us.
Right, right. It's astounding, the things that we don't realize, and we don't take the time, so grief should be, done like anything else. Like when you feel joy like right then and there, it's intensified, it's wonderful, but you don't hear people telling you to stop feeling that joy because it's too long. You should get over it. If too much you're joyful because you're pregnant, I don't think you should be happy anymore, because it's, you were pregnant, you got found out 2 months ago. Why are you still feeling joy now? Maybe you should get some medication about that. You don't hear people saying that, but with grief, and I know what it is, we're uncomfortable because we're not taught how to be there for people in that space. It's nobody's fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's a society as a whole. We're just not taught to be comfortable in somebody's space of loss and grief, let alone our own.
Yeah, I remember in that book, that's actually how you and I connected as well. You first, before I hired you, said, check out the Grief Therapy Handbook. And I'll share that in the show notes so people can go check it out. But that was a powerful, powerful book. Is that how you got certified, or how did you, tell us more about that?
There's a couple places that I'm certified, but this one was in particular that I use that you're talking about. So we'll talk about that one. That one's really a lot that I'm using in the last, probably since 2007, I've been using it. Actually 2013. I was introduced to it in about 2008, and I started to take some of those concepts, but then I really went into certification, started doing the whole program. And what I found is that it is so much about, that's why, it talks about all losses. So it's not just about death, and it's not about divorce. It's about all losses. It's about like moving. There are kids today that are moving like 10 times, in their childhood. And nobody's really addressed that with those kids. And so, and the kids are just told it's just part of that's what we do, we move, especially with military, and it's not anybody's fault, but kids can be resilient if you process their feelings with them, right? And
wow.
How to be resilient. But if we don't talk about it, it's a secret, it's a thing we don't talk, we just kind of have to figure out ourselves. That's when we feel very insecure, unstable, untrusting, It's just like anything else. You take anything from anybody, you start, there's something nobody's talking about. Don't you feel uneasy,
Well, you reminded me of something. Since most of my audience is salespeople, business owners, entrepreneurs, I teach a lot about how to take the fear out of selling. And ironically, I didn't put two and two together until I started working with you. I had a lot of loss as a kid. My mom left, major trauma, major loss. So I had a fear of abandonment and a fear of rejection. So when I got into sales, someone would say no to me, and I took it so personal, and it could take me days to recover from that. And I see a lot of salespeople who struggle with that. They struggle with call reluctance. They struggle with having sales conversations because we make it all about ourselves when there's pain and trauma and unresolved grief, because it's almost like we're afraid to have an authentic conversation because we put on that Academy Award winning I'm sales lady or super sales guy, and then that's where the used car salesman effect, I believe, comes, the pushy salesman effect. It all comes from unresolved grief, trauma, and inauthenticity. Would you say that that's probably pretty accurate?
Yeah, because it's, and it's, there's just so much stuff about that, of being authentic, that, we shy from, because what will people think? We have to be a certain ideal, and we run around with that, and it's killing us. It's illness. It was in the humbleness when I finally broke down and admitted everything. I couldn't run anymore. It was in the humility and humbleness that I got the healing finally, that I got the feeling. And you know what? I ended up being better at my business, at my work than I ever was. It was like, I remember the first time I went back on the podium and I shared from that humility space and then did my lecture. I had a standing ovation. I still remember that. And they're like, "You're back." I said, "I'm back and I'm better than back," you know? And so that's why what I want for people is to give 110%. You know, this is our only rodeo. We don't have another one. And if I'm going to carry, which I did for years of my past and not deal with it, then I've shortchanged myself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to shortchange yourself in life.
It's not even shortchanging yourself. And I know you were on my workshop last week, Saturday, and I started crying, because I see how many people are feeling hopeless right now, and they aren't allowing themselves to play at a big level. And I'm not even talking about work hard, play hard, or, it's hitting your financial goals. None of that. It's about your authentic self. When you rise and shine your light, that ripple effect, the butterfly effect, you can feel it across the world. Like, for real, this is science. This is truth. When we hide because we're scared or traumatized, or we just can't have the best relationships, the best anything. So what you do is so powerful, so powerful. And I remember in reading that book, I didn't realize it was like holding up a mirror, how many knee-jerk reactions I was programmed to say to people when someone else died, or when someone had a divorce. Is like, "Oh, you'll find a better one," or "Yeah, they're in a better place," all of those things. And when I was on the receiving end of them, I was like, shut up. You don't know how I feel. And so I wish there was a way that you could actually teach courses, and you probably do. I'll have you share at the end how people can get in touch with you. And she has an amazing, generous offer for all of our guests today. It's first come, first served, so I'm just going to throw that out there right away. But how do you help someone discover that they need to start or deserve to start? Is there any advice that you have? I mean, I know for me, it was just like destiny, fate. I met you like right after my brother died, right? And it was just like, I knew I hadn't grieved most of the things in my life, let alone that. And it was just like perfect timing. But what if people don't know where to start?
So it's the old adage that we really don't search out things unless something's not working, right? Something in our life. And so a lot of times I will have people, and I offer this 15-30-minute free consultation of just having a conversation with me. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's even longer, because I love what I do. And if I can help somebody even get to an avenue, may not be me, maybe somebody else. And I've got some other resources, but at least we can navigate together. Because my heart center is that what happened for me was not just missing all that time with my mother, all that time of unresolved loss of my dad, that I didn't really realize that it brought me not being present with my mom even, but with my kids. I ran from my other losses that I wasn't even present for my kids. So we affect our children if we don't deal with our stuff. And I'd love to have more conversations about how that happens so people can see that. Because the kids in today are our kids of our future. And so, unfortunately, you have tons of kids right now in therapy and all kinds of, because of what has happened, the mirrors, the mentors, their families, from running from our own losses. And I can say that more some other time. But what I do with the question you asked is, how do people come and find out? We have this conversation. And so like, sometimes people call me and say, I don't know if this is grief. I don't know what it is, but somebody told me to call you and talk to you about this. And I said, okay. So we go and we have these conversations on, let me quit this.
Tell them we're live on Facebook right now.
That's happened. I had it off and then it came back on. Okay. So basically what I tell people in my thing is that let's have this conversation on what's going on with your life. What's not working? You know, what do we see that's not working in our lives? And sometimes people will say, well, you know, I don't know if this is grief, but you know, my business, I can't seem to get my mojo back. So
Mm.
then we delve a little deeper on what's going on and what's happened in their life during this process of their business. Or let's say my kids, I'm going through a divorce and my kid is I'm acting out. I'm ready to ship him off to his dad. It's a thankless job. Okay, let's talk about what's going on there.
Yeah.
And we start to unpeel and find out. And ironically, what we find out is there's some unresolved loss that is tapped in, it's getting triggered, and is keeping them, and it's a story in their head, and it's keeping them to move forward and be in the present with these situations. And they're bringing the past into it that is sabotaging their life today in those areas. And we don't see that until we have conversations. That's why I would never recommend somebody just getting the book or whatever and trying to do it by themselves, because you know, we say in treatment, and no disrespect, but they say a sick mind can't help a sick mind. But
Yeah.
that's when you're riddled with grief or unresolved anger or loss, you can't help this with reading a book, you know, because we get in our head, and this is a heart issue. It's like the book says, you cannot help somebody paint a house with a hammer. So we're using the wrong tool if we start intellectualizing our heart.
So true. Oh my gosh. So, so true. Because I can see going through the therapy when I found you and understanding, you know, some of my anxiety, depression through my journey all stemmed back to unresolved grief. And I before finding you, I would talk to friends, you know, a lot of personal development, like, oh, that dopamine hit of just, you know, even listening to, you know, audiobooks and all that kind of stuff. But I'm here to tell you guys, personal development is not grief therapy. You can listen to all the books you want. I see it time and time again, Rosie, where people are just so like, I'll just read another book. I'll just spend money on another class. I'll just hire another coach. And I've seen it. And I that's why I love having you in my tool belt now, because I'll be like, you know what? I don't know if I can really help you yet until you resolve this. Because a lot of times, even when I was in real estate, I felt like I was a therapist. I saw, you know, husbands and wives going through emotional things, financial investments, all of those things are big deals. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, what was their grief? What was their story? What was really holding them back? And you helped me, and people have heard this story before, by going through that process with you. I started in early June. And guess what? I launched my podcast in July, and I was terrified, right? Because a lot of my grief, manifesting even in autoimmune disease, because as a little kid, I was like, you know, you don't have a voice. And it wasn't anybody's fault. Like you said, it wasn't anybody's fault, but I didn't feel like anyone heard me. So when someone said earlier in my adult life, you know, why should you be a speaker? You know, who's going to listen to you? It like triggered that earlier trauma in my life. And I was bawling like a baby the week before I launched my podcast, because I was like, oh my God, am I really doing this? And then once I got through that benchmark and launched it, it was like I was a butterfly coming out of the cocoon. And again, I attribute it to the process that I started with you. And would you say relieving yourself of that grief that's kind of holding you down or holding you hostage, like I like to call it, is that what allows, like, and I know I'm far from done, right? I'm going to probably have you on retainer for as long as you and I both shall live, but like that starts allowing you to do more, be more, have more, right?
Right. So when you think about it, if you can see the picture behind, is that there is a woman that has all the stones, right? That's all her unresolved loss. Very heavy, very heavy. How can you actually go out and do something, have motivation, have that self-esteem, that knowledge, that, you know, zest to get out there and do a business, a podcast, or any of that, if you're carrying extra baggage? We really don't realize how much it is in our backs and our bodies to grief. There's so many books now out about how the body knows. It's so true. And that's where a lot of illnesses happen. And so, you know, if you don't break open those stones and get rid of them by doing this work, you are going to be, it pushes you down. You don't have the freedom and I call it the sunlight of the spirit or anything to be creative. This picture was painted by somebody that went through a grief process and didn't realize she was a painter. She just started painting. She was never going formally to paint school. Her brother was a painter, not her. And she has opened up so much creativity walking through and processing grief, you know. So when we talk about this is, some people do therapy and I know that, we talk about this as therapy, but this actually program is not therapy, but it feels like it. I know that because of such awareness, involvement. It is really support and education. You do the work, and it's not me analyzing you and picking your brain and saying this is what's wrong with you, whatever. It's about you discovering. A lot of times people will be afraid. Well, what are you going to pull out of me, or what? I don't, what you're going to, do. No. This is stuff that's already been in there for you. This is stuff that's been sometimes even in the forefront that you're afraid to talk about it,
Oh my gosh. Well, you made me think of two examples, and I can't believe it. We've already gone over 30 minutes, so I could talk to you probably for hours, and I'm sure I will have you back for a second round. But you talked about grief impacting your body, and I know that we're heading into Breast Cancer Awareness Month. A lot of times, that's right. And I know that this might be controversial, but a lot of times dis-ease is manifested because of those unresolved matters of the heart. And it's been proven that cancers, and especially breast cancer, right, has manifested because of unresolved grief.
Right. My mother had breast cancer, and we think it's either colon or ovarian cancer, and had a brain tumor. We're not sure about all that, but we know about the cancer. And I believe was phenomenal of stuff in her grief, and I've researched more women than I know, a lot of unresolved stuff, anger and for like together, right? And so, not to say that there isn't some genetic stuff going on, not to say that, but I know that our body is a host of cancer cells, right? And it gets triggered by the stress that we put on our bodies, by our food, by our environment, all that. What did the doctors say when you come in with cancer diagnosis? They do all the things. No stress, eat fine, talk about your feelings, go to support, all the things we were supposed to do before the fact.
Right. It's always, those turning points. I mean, I even had that. I needed to be, kicked on my ass, pardon the expression, to have a wake-up call. And I was sick for 5 years and been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. And I do know, like, congestive heart failure runs in my family, and I told you that. I'm like, oh, so maybe I'm breaking a generational curse here by being open and sharing my grief and talking about it openly with my children and crying in front of them. I've cried so much in front of them. I think they're used to it now, but before it was like, mom, you're always so strong. You're always so tough, badass, all of the things that I thought I had to be, because like you said, never let them see you sweat, no pain, no gain. I was an athlete. I mean, I did all of the things, and it's just crazy how Healthy and Wealthy and Wise is really meant to help people understand that business and sales, it all comes from within, and finding your truth. Now, I want to give you your time and space. You said you had a testimonial you wanted to share of a client, and I think, guys, listen to this really intensely because it's powerful. And I really want you to be able to get that. And then we'll finish out with my closing question after you're done with that, Rosie, if that sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, this is a woman I worked in January 2020. It was at the end of January 2020. I believe that I finally stepped into grief therapy with Rosie Fox. I know this because a young man I hold near and dear died the evening of 1/17/2020. I received his voice, and I remembered when his voice was no more. I remember the call from his cousin. I was at work, a voicemail. You need to call me as soon as you get this message, please. My heart stopped with the news that he overdosed. I spent the weekend in AA meetings. I cried there. I yelled there. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't done something. I could have said something. Why did he do this? These are the thoughts that went through my mind, and I let them pour onto the floor of AA meeting halls. People listened, people cared, people were moved. And though some said all the usual things people say to a person grieving, a few said, maybe it's time to see Rosie. If I'm being honest, I can say that I've known Rosie. I've needed to Rosie's grief program for a long time before this moment. I admit that my life is ultimately defined by losses that I thought I'd already dealt with. But this loss, for whatever reason, pumped the brakes on me. I felt in my mind, my heart, and body that there was no space to run. I went to Rosie thinking I was going to process through the loss of a young man I mentioned earlier. Instead, I discovered through a lost timeline that the loss needing immediate attention was that of my mother. Here's the thing. My mother is alive and well, but our relationship was not. It was a strained relationship, strained since I was 13 years old, if not earlier then. I left it that way and I intended to settle for civil. I'm 38 years old now. Clearly, it was a subject that I, by choice, put to bed, never really intending to touch on. Thought I could live in full despite this, full life in spite this. Rosie Fox helped me look at incomplete relationships and the less than loved one in my life. And as it turns out, though I had a lot of good things happen and have mended some wounds in my recovery as an addict and alcoholic, the one thing that I chose to run from is the one thing that may have stood in the way of my living the best life. Open wounds regarding my mother. The brief program with Rosie seemed to become a metaphorical contract with myself, to at least put my best foot forward. I have no idea where this whole thing with Rosie was going, especially upon agreeing to work first on the grief over my mom. We finished at the end of March 2020. I had not missed a session. It was an emotional roller coaster of doing assignments, talking things out, sometimes redoing assignments because I had honestly overthought or held back on something, crying, reflecting, etc. And scroll forward to July 2nd, 2020. Between the end of March to July, things started shifting in a new direction. There's no explanation for all this, but that by God and by the willingness to grieve more thoroughly, things have opened up for me. A new career is in the works. And while waiting the words, "You've been hired," I took my mother on our first trip together ever. July 2nd through July 5th, a 4-day to San Luis Obispo County, where I was born, she says. I courageously and spontaneously took my mother on a trip to revisit the roots of where life and my father began. Parentheses, my father passed away when I was 13. He and I were very close. My mother and I went everywhere. We talked this trip. Well, I let her talk because honestly, my whole life I was the one talking at her or otherwise avoiding her, never really talking with. She shared memories of her and my dad and the home they built together. We took photos, we hugged, and I told her I loved her. To say, oh, this is unreal. I never envisioned it happening. I was busier wondering and planning how to get away from my mother. Because of this first real try at working Rosie's grief program, because I had nowhere left to go but run towards something that I thought I could, in fact, live fine without, I got to have this really beautiful, meaningful moment in time with my mother. And though I know there's still much work to do, I got this weird, intense feeling that I keep uncovering incomplete relationships. And if I keep learning into grief healing, then even more real, cool moments and opportunities are to come for me. I guess I never really did have a clue on just how much better life could be. I'd fantasized about it, but never thought about how not working though through grief would stand in the way of what I really wanted. So that was the long version of being able to say, good, thank you, Rosie. Thank you for offering me and continue to offer me, because I'm coming back for the next beat down. Aha. To really weave through some things in my life that I really thought I had already made sense of. I thought I knew what grief was, and at least I thought I knew what it meant to me. Turns out I know nothing at all, and that's actually a freeing thing. I'll be seeing you soon because I really like this feeling of doors opening, like you had said they would. You were right about me all along.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Wow. That's
why I do this. That is why I do this. Because I love that result. I love that result. When we die, when we're on our deathbed, we don't care how many cars and what we got. We care what we matter. We have our relationship, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's what business is. I mean, is relationships, right? You and I met through BNI, and it's all about long-term, meaningful, deep relationships. And when you're true to yourself and you can release the baggage, the stuff and move forward, that lights the world on fire.
Yeah.
So I'm really honored to have worked with you and continuing to work with you on my own journey, being transparent. I know I can always be better. And a lot of it is that heart stuff that I haven't released yet.
And let me tell you, I was honored that you opened your heart to me. And I thank you for this opportunity to share on your podcast. But more than anything, I thank you for our relationship.
Love you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Try not to cry here, although I know that's allowed.
It is.
So before we wrap it up, and I appreciate you spending some extra time with me today, how can people find you? And I will put all of this in the iTunes show notes, and I'll comment below on Facebook. But where can people find you, and tell them about your free offer before I ask you the last question?
Okay, so I'm offering, a package of 2-hour sessions, 2 individual sessions for 2 people. So that means, each person will get 2 hours of a session with me to kind of uncover, discover, and recover, basically trying to see what is it that, they're needing. If they're needing my programs, any of them, maybe not necessarily grief, but might be the other ones, or they're needing another kind of work stuff, and we'll figure that out. But that's what I'm offering, because more in my heart is people where they need to be, whether it's me or somebody else, they need to get to that place.
Awesome. So again, 2 people, and the first 2 people at the time of this live recording, or if it happens to be when it comes into iTunes, and it'll show up in iTunes sometime this weekend, guys. So if you're tuning in live, or you're seeing this on the replay, how do they reach you? And I'll share your email address. Is that how they reach you to cash in on the offer?
Yes, have them email me, please.
Okay, I'll share your email address with everyone. And of course, my final question that I ask of all of my guests, because I love hearing different people's perspective in this world of I'm right, you're wrong, none of that BS matters to me. I love learning from others. So when you hear the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise, Rosie, what does that mean to you?
Okay, so healthy means that, not just you're healthy in your body, but it's in your mind, body, and spirit. It's how we, we clear the gunk out, right? And in order to be healthy, we have to be wise, right? And wise is being discerning. So to get clarity is key, because I can't make good decisions if I'm not clear. I can't, there's so many avenues of getting clarity, but more than anything is like what I'm teaching is getting rid of the old belief system so we can be clear to make good decisions. So when I think of it, I think of so many things. It's just not about, what we eat, because that's a big factor, but how we take care of ourselves physically, how we take care of ourselves emotionally and mentally, spiritually. And, you can't be wise if you're not taking care of those things. Those are going to interfere. They just seem to, no matter what you do, they're going to interfere in your life. Yeah. And in order to be wise, you have to have, some clarity.
Yeah. And what she shares, guys, is so powerful. So I'll put in the comments how you can reach her and take advantage of what she has to offer. Just even if you miss out on the first 2 free offers, she's definitely a great one to talk to, and just see if you know someone grieving, if you know someone hurting right now, especially if they've been through addiction or suicidal attempts or anything like that. A lot of it is all grief born. I truly believe that. So thank you so much for being my final guest for Suicide Awareness Month and Prevention. And until next time, guys, we will be back here on Friday. I'm kicking off October with a lot of major influencers in the world of business. So Friday, we're going to be talking about LinkedIn with Carol Kemmerer, who's a internationally known branding expert, who is going to share with you how LinkedIn is the best promotion or best investment that you didn't have to pay for in marketing and promoting yourself. So until next time, guys, here's to your best health, your best wealth, and your best wisdom. Bye-bye for now.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, refer a friend, and please drop me a rating or a review. If you do that, I'll reward you with a free 20-minute free coaching session on crafting your journey to your best self. Reach out to me at lois@loiscoffee.com to claim your 20-minute slot. Until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.